going to say good morning, but it's good afternoon. Good
Yes,
afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. For the record, my name is Ed Serna, and I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Workforce Commission. With me is Chris Nelson, our Chief Financial Officer. I would like to recognize our Commission Chairman and the Commissioner representing the public, Brian Daniel, who's here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to give you a high-level overview of our fiscal year 26-27 legislative appropriations request. TWC is requesting an all-funds appropriated budget of $2.7 billion in fiscal year 2026 and $2.8 billion in fiscal year 2027. Federal funds make up approximately $2.4 billion, or 86% of that total each year, and general revenue-related funds make up just over $264.3 million per year. The majority of the general revenue we receive is used to draw down federal funds, and about 77% of the federal funds we're appropriated each year are issued as grants to local workforce boards, community colleges, independent school districts to meet the needs of businesses and citizens in Texas. The requested funds will be used by TWC to advance our mission to promote and support a workforce system that creates value and offers employers, individuals, and families the opportunity to achieve and sustain economic prosperity. TWC works with the 28 local workforce solutions boards to provide services to employers, job seekers, workers, and families. Texas is now home to over 657,000 employers and has a labor force of over 15.5 million, which is greater than the populations of every state except California, New York, Florida, and of course Texas. I mention this because it's a major driver behind the increases in service demands that we're seeing in all of our programs. I would like, however, to bring to your attention the following programs that have seen the highest increases in demand for services. Our vocational rehabilitation program, which helps individuals with disabilities prepare for work, has seen significant increases in the demand for services since 2022. In fiscal year 2024, over 69,000 participants were served through the VR program, up from roughly 65,000 per year in fiscal year 22 and 23. While the requests for services are increasing, we are challenged with retaining experienced counselors. All of our counselors are certified professional counselors. The increase in demand for services, coupled with vacancies, especially counselors, has adversely impacted our ability to consistently provide timely service to our customers. We're very aware of this problem and are taking steps to address it. In workforce development, we continue to see increased interest in our apprenticeship program by both employers and job seekers. Over the past 10 years, the number of apprentices trained has more than doubled from approximately 4,600 in 2015 to 9,800 in 2024. The career fields have also expanded to meet employers' needs. Now they not only include the traditional fields like electricians, plumbers, and carpenters, but we've added healthcare, information security, and child care youth development. In our child care program, we work with the 28 workforce solutions boards to deliver child care assistance to qualifying families. By the end of 2024, we served approximately 150,000 children per day, up from just over 145,000 at the beginning of that year. Our goal is to serve an average of 155,000 children beginning in 25 and to continue to work towards trying to increase that amount. However, even at these levels, I want to make sure that y'all are aware that we have a significant wait list. At the beginning of calendar 24, the wait list was approximately 75,000 children. By December of last year, that had increased to just under 95,000 children. There are unfortunately more qualifying families requesting childcare than there are funds or often services available to support them. And then finally, I'd like to bring to your attention that we've seen increased activity regarding attempts to defraud the UI system. While the number of claims is not as high as it was back during the pandemic, we haven't seen a corresponding decline in the number of attempts to defraud the system, primarily using identity theft. I am pleased to report that our staff, both our cybersecurity and our fraud deterrence staff, have been successful at keeping the fraudsters out from getting funds However, the fraudsters continue to develop new tools, and we need to continue to keep up with them. Now I'll ask Chris Nelson to go over our exceptional items in the capital budget requests.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members. For the record, Chris Nelson, Chief Financial Officer, Texas Workforce Commission. As Mr. Cerner alluded to, TWC's #1 priority for exception items this session for your consideration is our request of $70.4 million in general revenue over the biennium to fully match our vocational rehabilitation grant, which would bring in an additional $260.2 million in federal funds. There are millions of Texans with disabilities, many which could use VR services to either get into, back into, or improve their earnings power in the workforce. Since the transition of the VR program to TWC, we have been able to use existing funds available to support the program. But with an increase in customers and services provided, we have exceeded what we can provide with the existing general revenue. Our next priority is a request of $13 million in general revenue to support TWC's apprenticeship program. The apprenticeship program is one of TWC's strategies to target the shortage of middle-skilled workers in Texas. TWC has seen an increased demand on this program and no longer has funds to support the increased demand. Next, there's our request of $3.4 million to support our Texas Veterans Leadership Program. This program provides services to reconnect over 22,000 exiting military service men and women into the Texas workforce every year. TWC started this program with federal funds years ago, but those federal funds must be redirected to provide other services based on new federal program requirements. TWC is also requesting $1 million in general revenue each year to support the Texas Veterans Network, which provides a holistic approach to connect veterans to over 300 veteran-based community groups. Several other exceptional items in your materials that I'll go through are $20.6 million in general revenue to support workforce readiness, outreach, and youth services, $9.4 million in funds to expand the older individuals who are blind program, in which the demand for services exceeds the federal funds available, $360,000 to support the administration of career schools and colleges, $690,000 to support the increased demand of labor market information requested, $1.2 million to support the labor law investigation claims, $550,000 to support the Civil Rights Division needed to maintain the backlog of equal opportunity cases investigations. We have several other exception items of general revenue dedicated funds to support the unemployment insurance program. As we have gotten further away from the effects of COVID-19, the federal funds provided to administer the unemployment insurance program have gone back to pre-COVID levels. However, the cost of doing business with the UI program has not gone back to pre-COVID levels, specifically with fraud detection, deterrence, and cybersecurity. COVID put the UI program on the map for sophisticated fraud and cybersecurity threats, and the available federal funds are no longer sufficient to keep up with these threats. TWC is also seeking general revenue dedicated funds to support the cost of the unemployment insurance mainframe, implementation of the UI State Information Data Exchange, network modernization, and funds to continue the replacement of our labor law case management system. That concludes my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who are we going? Are we go? Okay. Representative Collier. And then.
Thank you. I want to commend you on the work that you're doing with this unemployment fraud. I've had in my district claims made, and you guys work expeditiously to ensure that the correct information was filed so that my constituents would not go without for too long. So I appreciate the work, and it's definitely needed because I've had more than one constituent fall victim. Somebody claimed the benefits and it wasn't the right person, but you guys were able to clear that up. How are you able to recoup the money? Like, what do you do to get the money back?
It depends on the type of fraud, quite honestly. A lot of times the fraud that's being perpetrated is being perpetrated by organized crime or foreign entities. Our best success is to stop the first payment from ever going out, and we've been relatively successful at doing that. If funds do get out, it's normally just a first payment that gets out. Then we'll work with either local law enforcement, district attorneys, things like that, or the U.S. Attorney's Office and also the Office of Inspector General with the Department of Labor. We have worked with the Department of Justice to try to recover some of that. Most of the time it becomes almost impossible to recover those funds, which is why we try to stop it way before it ever gets out our door, because they've gone through bank account to bank account to bank account, and then there's really not ever a real person to pursue.
Right.
Excuse me, to pursue.
So, that's probably one of the good parts about it being weekly. You know, you have to have
Right.
the work requirement, look for work requirement, but also, because that's what happened, my constituent didn't get their first payment. One of them, you stopped it you headed it off, but then one of them didn't get their first payment, and then
Right.
that's where they were able to detect and
Yes,
do the
ma'am.
investigation. So that was good. So good work on that. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. My question, other question, deals with the Senior Community Service Employment Program.
Silk.
That is a program that's funded by the federal government, the Department of Labor, and I guess you're a pass-through entity for it, for seniors
Yes, ma'am.
55 who need training and employment.
Yes, ma'am. If you're referring to what we're asking for, this is for seniors who are
I know.
blind or just have lost their vision.
Right, and that's why I'm asking, because I didn't see any money for this one, because it's a pass-through. My question is there a similar state-funded program to, or that replicates or could do what this Senior Community Service Employment Program does? Because there's a need for it,
Yes, ma'am.
but if there's no money for it,
Yes,
then it's not going to be there. And I have lots of seniors who would love to participate in this program, but it's not funded at the federal level. So we don't have a program similar, or do we, at
No,
the state
ma'am.
level?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Ma'am, the program you're referring to is a relatively small, it isn't part of our programs that we operate, the senior CSEP program, as we call it. It is a relatively small federal program, but I think there is a very, very small matching component to it, but it's largely just a federal program that we operate.
So you operate it because it's a federal program. Is there a legislation that would allow it to happen? I mean, do you have to have legislation to continue this program if it's not funded at the federal level?
There would have to be funding for it, state
Okay.
funding for it, yes, ma'am. If any, like I indicated, 86% of our funding is federal funding. Any reduction in those fundings would require us to reduce services or eliminate services, and then also eliminate staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if even a small program like that, if it were not funded and we did not get state funding for it or replacement funding for it, then we'd have to cease that program.
But did you, in your research and requesting your LAR, did you see a need to have a program for seniors that are 55 and older and who need training or retraining and job placement?
We provide support and training to all individuals. That one particular program was focused just to that age population. But someone, speaking from experience, someone of, and by experience I mean age, someone almost of any age can go in and still get the assistance they need from any one of our 28 local workforce boards, participate in some of our other programs that we have available. They're not restricted to just younger people and just this one supporting older people.
Okay, well then I'll get with you because I want to know what program that is so I can refer my constituents properly.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Garcia Hernandez.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you both so much for being here today. I had some questions, and Representative Collier was talking a little bit about one instance, but what are some of the other instances of fraud that y'all see that y'all are having to deal with at the TWC?
The biggest instance has to do with unemployment insurance because it's $2 to $3 billion paid out every year. Back during the pandemic, we paid out just over $60 billion, and that really drew the fraudsters in. But it's primarily in our unemployment insurance program. Our fraud detection and deterrence program actually looks at all of our funding. So whether it's child care, whether it's vocational rehabilitation, or any of our other funding that we issue through grants. But the majority of it is in the unemployment insurance. And it's because they can steal an identity. The only two ways to get unemployment insurance in Texas are either online or through one of our 4 call centers. We have very qualified staff on the call centers and online. We have several things that I'd be glad to visit your office to talk more, and all of y'all to talk more specifically about, but that trigger us to suspend a claim. But it's the area that's getting the most attention, but it's across the board that we're looking at that. And the other thing that we're looking at is we have fraudsters that attempt to attack our system. So you move over to the cybersecurity side, and you'll see some exceptional items for that. If they can find a weakness into our system, then they don't have to perpetrate a fraud. They can just break in and do what they need to do. We've been very successful at fending those off. So those kinds of attacks, I would link to fraud more than someone just trying to breach the data.
Sure, and I was actually interested if whether there was a way that we could also find out to what level some of our own constituents within our districts have been impacted by that as well.
We can do that, yes,
okay,
ma'am.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And just so that y'all know, during the pandemic, Chris was the subject of a stolen identity. Someone attempted to file unemployment insurance using Chris's identity, which we were able to stop. He was still working for us. So.
According to the claimant, the fraudster, I was in the marketing department of TWC or something like that. So,
Not the case.
yes.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good point. Thank you. Representative Harrison.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director. How would you characterize Texas Workforce Commission's role with regard to employment discrimination?
Our role is to enforce the state laws that are available to us or to the public, either on employment or housing. You'd asked a question of the LBB earlier.
Yeah.
It's a situation where we are reimbursed by the federal government, to answer your question directly. But our role is to investigate it and then come to an objective conclusion. We meet with both the employer, speaking just of employment, both the employer and the person making the allegation.
No, thank you. Although it's a little bit cheating. You got the answer or the question in advance. I asked them if you had time to think about it. Okay. No, just kidding there. I appreciate the response and the way you started the response to my question, which was directed to you, which is the role of Texas Workforce Commission with regard to employment discrimination. And if I heard you correct, you said is to enforce state level employment discrimination cases, which is rather intuitive, right? That makes sense. Is gender identity a protected class for purposes of employment law in the state of Texas?
There was a Supreme Court decision back in 20, I think it was Bostick, that added that language, but it's not anything that we specifically point out. Our focus is on the categories of discrimination that are listed in state law.
But that SCOTUS case that you referred to, I mean, that the impact of that would have had jurisdiction on federal cases of employment discrimination. That would have had no bearing on Texas employment law, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's purely federal, the implications of that case. Okay, thank you. Yes, I agree with that. I do want to hold up something here, which you may or may not have seen. This is from your website, so I assume you've seen it. All right, this was the front page of your employment discrimination page.
Yes, sir.
All right, and in addition to the traditional protected classes, there are a couple of other terms on here. Again, this is a state of Texas government website. You are the Texas Workforce Commission. You are responsible, according to your testimony today, for the enforcement of Texas statutes regarding employment law. But there's a term on here that is not one of the protected classes, gender identity.
Yes, sir.
Why was this language put on the front of your website?
It on the front of the Civil Rights Division website. Not to correct you, but not on our website. The home page.
You're right. It might not be on the landing page, but I mean, right here, it's Texas Workforce
Yes, sir.
Commission.
No, I'm not.
Texas.gov. It's right there.
Yes, sir. No, I'm not arguing with you about that. I just mean it's not.
I didn't take it that way.
At the very front. That was brought to our attention sometime back. I think you assisted us.
I think by me.
Yes, sir. You assisted us. Well, we corrected that. It shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
It was someone simply quoting that back in 2020, and then through web page refreshes, we never removed it.
Okay.
But it should be removed now. It's not there.
Yeah, no.
So-
After I exposed
Yes,
this,
sir, and
y'all did change it. Yes, and we communicated. I appreciate you taking it down, but it's baffling to me. How does something like that happen? So, like, I mean, who would have made the decision to just insert a wholly, it's almost a whole cloth fabrication that would be treated as a protected class for purposes of employment law in the state of Texas? Who made the decision to do that? Who did this?
I'd have to find out who made the decision to do it back when it was done, which would have been in the late 2020, early 21.
Okay.
I was the executive director, but it's not a decision that came direct to me for stamp of approval.
Okay.
Uh,
So you were
I'm-
unaware that this was put on the website?
Not until you brought it to my attention.
Okay.
So
How long was it up then? You said probably from 2020 until I flagged it.
probably 21 until
Whenever I made-
November, September, October, something like that.
late last year.
Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I was just very surprised when I came across it, so it did make it
I was
public. And
too.
I appreciate the quick rectification. I do appreciate that. Were there any, given that it was up there on your website for years, and the plain language of the reading of the website would lead one to believe that for purposes of employment law, there could be employment discrimination cases brought against employers. Were there any complaints resulting from this language on your website the Texas Workforce Commission prosecuted or was involved in any way, or maybe another way to phrase it would just be, what if any actions were taken pursuant to this apparent policy being on your website?
There were some cases that were not cases, but complaints that were brought to us. We investigated them, and they were not substantiated.
But
So-
they were brought to you as a complaint against a Texas employer.
Yes, sir.
On the basis of gender identity.
Yes, sir.
And this was not y'all acting in any way as a contractor for the federal government, because for a brief time during the Biden administration, by rule, they did try and I think extra constitutionally jam that in to the prior definition of sex for being one of the protected classes. But that's now, of course, being undone, I believe, in the process of, or at least re-reviewed at a minimum by the current administration. But you're telling me that those complaints that you investigated, those were pursuant to state complaints based on somebody's understanding of state law? Like when they came to you and said this, hey, we've got a potential complaint, why did you take action at all? Because the state of Texas the legislature has never authorized y'all to work on complaints based on gender identity.
We also conduct complaints for EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity.
The federal
Right.
EEOC.
Yes, sir.
So are those
Same-
what you're,
same
and that's
thing for
that's
HUD.
kind of what I'm trying to get at. Were the complaints that you referenced that you were involved in, was this resulting from your work sort of as a contractor to the federal government?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in all of those cases.
I believe so. I'd have to go back and check to make sure that it was in all of those cases.
Okay. And I assume, given that the administration, if you go to the federal EEOC website I just did 5 minutes ago to look at it, because again they jammed that language, gender identity, gender identity into that via regulation. Which, if you go to the website and click on it, the website's down, and it says
Right.
this is being re-reviewed. I assume, or can you assure the committee that the Texas Workforce Commission is not adding to the statutory definitions of protected classes, and that you guys will be complying with the federal government's changes insofar as you continue to act as a contractor for the federal government?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. I can assure the committee of that. I would like to point out that in the preceding 4 years, there were agreements that were sent to us by our federal partners, and when they had that language and we couldn't have language that really didn't comport to state law, and we couldn't reconcile it, then we simply didn't execute the agreement.
Okay.
Most of the time, because Texas is such a large state and we've been very successful at working with the federal government, they just continue to work under the old agreement.
Okay.
We took a pretty serious stand on that. So those things that we were aware of, we were able to simply say, we need this changed, or we just won't execute it.
Very helpful. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you. And just to make sure I understand you, my understanding, or sorry, let me rephrase. To make sure I hear you correctly, because I am curious about the interaction between y'all as a state executive branch agency and federal government executive branch agencies, because I would be rather horrified to have learned that the state of Texas, one of our agencies, was enforcing against Texas employers a wholly extra constitutional reading of the plain language of federal statutes. And so you're saying when they would bring these cases to you, you would simply defer on them and you wouldn't take action yourself?
The cases or agreements, you have to enter into an agreement with the federal government
Correct.
that says you'll do so many of these things, and then we'll reimburse you at this rate. And if we didn't believe that language was favorable to comporting with state law, then we simply didn't execute.
But maybe I heard you. Maybe I heard you wrong a second ago. My understanding from what you said a second ago was that there were a few cases where you did investigate on behalf of them. Are you saying when they came to you, you just declined? Like the only interaction with them was to consider it, and then you passed?
No, the action that I was taking was with regard to formally executing an agreement that would bind us to doing that. Cases would come to us, and we'd investigate the cases that came to us, whether they were federal or state generated cases. That's one of the things that we have to do in our role. So,
right. Okay. Well, I don't want to take up more time on this, but if you wouldn't mind, I may follow up with you offline just to
Yes, sir.
get more of a granular level of understanding of those few instances where this did arise
I'll be glad to.
from folks seeing this on your website or under the pendency of some type of arrangement you had with the federal government.
yes, sir, be more than glad to.
But it's purely on a reimbursement basis, so this is not a revenue stream
No, sir, it's not. And
to
it's-
TWC. Your interactions with the feds on this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Very helpful. Appreciate
Thank
it. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Berry?
I'll make this pretty quick. Can you tell me how many unemployment claims y'all process a year?
I think I've got it. I should have it off the top of my head, but I don't. I apologize.
I know it's a lot.
Yes, sir. I know that we take probably, every month, we take probably close to about 700,000 calls. We're processing about 60, I think, 70,000 claims. And where it gets complicated is there are continuing claims, someone who has filed a claim, and then they still have to touch base with us again to continue to get the money for the 26 weeks or until they become employed. And then there are new claims, but it's probably in that neighborhood.
I've used some of y'all's services actually for training purposes. Y'all have created quite the library of various training resources that we use in our agency and whatnot. And so you don't have a clue. It's like 60 or 70,000 a month. You
Well,
figure-
it's about, Chris was telling me it's about 15,000 a week, so,
Extrapolate
30,
it.
60.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You have any idea how many of them are approved or declined? Or?
Not off the top of my head.
I believe when we kind of use it for estimating the trust fund future projections, it's around 20%, I believe, that actually become eligible.
Wow.
I'd have to double check the number, but I think it's around 20%.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that we, as an employer, I've had 2 instances that were declined, regardless of level of information provided to show that we've given employees multiple chances to make right on, performance and whatnot. So, anyway, I was just curious what your thoughts were on that, and what are your goals when it comes to those types of things to protect employers too?
Yes.
I mean, we have to protect employees, obviously. I mean, that's the utmost importance, but we want to make sure we have a healthy workforce. But as far as employers go, we want to protect them as well and make sure that we don't have bad actors out there as well. So,
Yeah, we agree 100%. I mean, the employers drive the economy, all
Yeah.
657,000 of them.
handful of them. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to visit more with you.
Sure, I'd
want
love to
more
sit down with
information
you and
because,
chat a little bit.
We've got a very elaborate process that involves appeals and higher level appeals ultimately to the commission for both the employer and the employee can pursue. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about the cases that you specifically referenced.
Yep.
Outside of a public
Happy to talk about
venue.
it. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you,
you,
Mr. Berry. Mr. Cerna, you mentioned earlier 2.7 billion, then 2.8 billion, 26, 27,
Yes, sir.
and then 86% are federal funds, 264 mil are GR, you used that 264 mil to draw down the federal funds?
The majority of it, not all of it, but the
Okay.
majority of it is used to draw down the federal funds. Yes,
So
sir.
if you had more GR, you could do more, you could provide more services in general based upon the responsibilities you have.
It all depends for some of our programs, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, but for some of our programs, we're drawing down the maximum that's available to Texas already.
Okay.
So any additional general revenue that we receive, we would be able to use it in the program, but it wouldn't draw down any more federal dollars because we're at the maximum draw.
So what programs would those max?
So childcare, we requested an exception item last session to fully match our childcare program. That was approved. So we were fully matched on the childcare program. Some federal programs don't require a match, such as a workforce opportunity, WIOA programs, which includes adult dislocated and youth services. The biggest one that we have a shortfall on match is our number one exceptional item, which is the vocational rehab program. And that provides basically $3.69 in federal funds for every state dollar that's contributed to the program.
Right. And with the, if the legislature were to decide to fund that exceptional item, then we would be drawing down the maximum that's available
Correct.
for vocational rehabilitation at that point. Any additional dollars we could use, any additional general revenue in child care, any place else, we could use it directly to benefit the program, but not to draw down more federal dollars.
Okay, so if you had, I mean, because these are existing programs, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If we put more dollars into it, you could serve more families directly.
Yes, sir.
Using state resources rather than the federal, or
Yes.
in conjunction with the federal resources.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned you've administered $60 billion in Corona. I don't know if I heard that right.
Yes,
I
sir,
wrote it
you
down.
did. It was just under $60 billion that we paid out in benefits with the CARES Act and the lost wages under the previous previous administration. That's now the current administration.
Correct.
But yes, sir, that was at our height. There's a chart that we have. If y'all are ever interested, I'd be glad to share it with you. We fondly called it my EKG. Because
Goes
it
up.
tracks from
Yeah.
20, and it shows the hurricanes and the recession, and then
Correct.
when we hit COVID, it was just literally off the chart. It just looks like the edge of the graph. But that was the $60 billion. We've come back down to normal payments more or less now.
Right. So that graph that line went all the way up. Then it exponentially came down.
Yes, sir.
Correct, that
The state
previous
recovered very well and very quickly, unlike other states after the pandemic.
Correct. Have we exhausted all our coronavirus relief? All the
Yes, sir.
funds that we intended to use, those are all exhausted then?
Yes, sir.
That's correct. We have a very small residual amount of our unemployment insurance. I would call COVID funding, but it's very, very small amounts that we're spending down. All the child care, we received roughly $5.9 billion in child care COVID funding. All of that was done with at the end of September.
Okay. And then all those dollars exhausted, most of the child care dollars, that $5 billion went to the providers, so they didn't go to the families.
The majority of it went directly to providers for what we call provider relief payments during COVID, when they either had to shut down or had diminished capacity that they could provide services. So that was federal funding that was provided to make
Yeah, we were
payments.
standing up some of these
Correct.
agencies or
Right.
child care centers.
Correct.
The unemployment, the trust fund, I remember that was kind of an issue. Is that fully funded?
So
The unemployment trust fund.
SB 8, a couple sessions ago, provided $7.2 billion in ARPA funding to replenish the trust fund. So we were in a deficit, of course, during COVID.
Correct.
We had at the time roughly $5.9 billion in Title 12 loans, which are loans from the federal treasury to allow us to pay benefits. That 7.2 basically allowed us to pay off the Title 12 loans. It brought the trust fund to the floor of, which was back then, I think, right about 1.2, 1.3 billion. So it brought the trust fund to the floor of where it needed to be on October September 30th, 2021, I think
Okay.
it was. So since then, it's, it's been the employer-operated program that we normally operate. And as as we have more layoffs and you have more benefits paid,
Yeah,
the
you
trust fund
exhaust
gets
the-
smaller, and
right.
then you collect taxes
So
to replenish the
are
trust
are
fund.
are we sound in that, should something happen, can a trust fund take a big blow?
So right now, my projections, there's what's called a floor test, and the floor test is only done once a year. It's done October 1st every year. 1% of taxable wages is the floor, 2% of taxable wages is the ceiling. So the floor is probably going to be about 1.3 billion come this upcoming September. I'm projecting at this point we will be below the floor by roughly 180 million, 160 million, I think it is, which would mean a deficit tax would come in for employers to kick in to
cover that.
To cover that.
Yeah, okay. I want to go back to the child care, because you mentioned, Director Cerner, about the 95,000 children in the child care services program that are on a wait list.
Yes, sir.
And I think about 25,000 of those, as I understand from your website, 25,000 are from the Gulf Coast region that I represent. Does the agency have an understanding on why the wait list for the child care services program has been so long since COVID?
It's twofold, quite frankly. First off, and this is not placing blame, but the providers oftentimes struggle to keep and maintain staff, and there are ratios that you have to have.
Right.
Second, the available funding that we have, we're spending it all on the 150+ thousand children a day. So it's a matter of available funding or not being available, as well as capacity. Now, some child care providers have the capacity, but the funding isn't there. In other cases, it's a matter of there may be funding, but there's no capacity. The child care providers, much as they do work with us, simply can't bring any more children on board because they can't retain or hire the employees that they need, the teachers that they need to fill that. So we've been working with them and looking at plans individually to see how we can help them with that first dilemma, the workforce, through things like apprenticeships, other creative things, and then
Yeah, because I think the average salary is what, $10 or $12 an hour.
it's pretty low. Yes, sir.
It's abysmal. And to be able to maintain, I guess, as the operator, each one of those are small businesses, so
Yes,
each
sir.
one of those, they also have, as I understand, some regulatory, I don't want to say constraints, but a lot of regulation and red tape they have to
Yes, sir.
meet to even operate as a child care facility, right?
Well,
At least as a high-level one, because
Yes,
I
sir.
visited some of the ones in my district, so.
yes, sir. Yeah, there are safety standards, there are nutritional standards that they
Correct.
provide food, things like that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, there is.
Do we know from the agency's perspective how long, on average, are eligible families on a wait list?
I think we have that information. I don't
Yeah.
have it in front of me, and I can certainly get it to you.
Yeah,
and the
that'd be
committee.
helpful. Because what we're trying to do is, whether this committee or the legislature, if there's a will
Yes,
to
sir.
kind of reduce that wait list, I'd be highly encouraged that we would.
Yes, sir.
And so thank you for the 150,
150.
thousand folks, families, children that are benefiting, right? But we'd like to see more children because they qualify, right?
Yes, sir.
Under existing rules, these 95,000 families qualify if we could fund
Yes, sir.
the whole program, correct?
Yes, sir. It's about $1 million a year for 106 children in 26 and 103 children per day, in addition.
Correct.
In 27, and that's because we anticipate child care rates increasing across that span of time. But we understand the frustration of the wait list
Yeah.
from the perspective of a family, single parent or parents that are on that wait list, they qualify so that they can go off and get workforce training or start a job, get into the workforce.
They could theoretically, I don't know, be part of a vocational
Yes, sir.
training
Yes, sir.
program that allows them to earn more or learn more so they can earn more.
Yes, sir. It's not just getting a job,
Right.
it's improving
Staying
the
there.
job that you got as well. Yes, sir.
And being able to, at some point, afford childcare on their own is,
Yes, sir.
without the subsidy.
And they once they get established and everything, then they do. By the way, I don't want to leave the committee. The families do have a portion of child care that they pay. It's a small portion, but it still gives them investment in that as well. It's not like it's completely
Correct.
free.
The type of providers, I guess, what type of providers, and I'm talking about like on data collection, because I remember for the data collection part during COVID, each of the providers had to report, I guess, data
Mhm.
about maybe their census. I'm trying to understand. So I guess my question is, what types of providers have to report enrollment capacity to the agency?
Each of the providers makes that information available to the local boards, and then the local boards make it available to us. But that's not all the providers, and it maybe not all the capacity that a provider has. I mean, they are a business and they have private pay,
Mhm.
and I'm certain that they'd want to have some set aside for their own wait list.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is functionally, if you're a provider, do you have to report your data to the Workforce Commission or to Health and Human Services?
Not to us, no, sir.
Okay.
I believe they
Would that be
report
helpful? I'm not sure.
Capacity,
That's
just
from
general
some of our capacity
capacity.
Total
itself.
capacity
Yeah.
to
To HHSC, the licensing entity.
right.
Okay. Um,
Bless you.
if we could get the agency more data on that or authorize you to, I guess, collect the data, would that be something that would be helpful?
Yes, sir. There's several organizations and individuals have raised a concern about not being able to get the data, including us.
Right.
So it would be helpful for us to be able to do that.
Do you need a statute or could you do that by rulemaking since I
Yeah.
guess Lottery Commission has expansive authority? Do you have expansive authority?
Well, we would only have authority over the 7,000+ providers that are in our program, but there are close to 13,000 providers, so there's a whole nother set of providers that can thumb their nose at us because they don't take any of our kids, so to speak.
Right.
So it would probably be better if it were legislative action and it were for all child care providers, not just the Texas Rising Star providers, which is what
Right.
our providers are.
Do you would need legislative action so that you could, gather the data? Would you need any additional resources to be the repository of and collection of the data? Do you need an FTE? Do you need technology? I'm just trying to understand.
I'd have to go back and
Okay.
look.
Or could you absorb it in existing resources?
We would probably need something, someplace to collect it.
Right.
And there are costs associated with that.
That's fair.
We use the state's data center, and I'm not complaining, but their services aren't free. So, but we could get some information for any kind of a bill like that. If you're interested in that, we'll get you something.
Yeah, we're. I think we have a bill for that.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Sounds like an app.
yes.
I think we've worked on that fiscal note.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for cooperating with us on that. Last, what I'm trying to, is there any reason why, other states, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Missouri, North Dakota, are using state resources for the child care services program? Is there, could we, I guess, get a response from the agency of why we couldn't use state GR to help in this?
I don't know of a reason that we couldn't use any
Yeah.
funds that the legislature provided to us.
Right.
For however long we could get those funds committed to us. I mean, yeah, it's not the agency saying, no, don't give me any more because I can't spend it, because we can spend it, but it's a commitment it's a legislative decision to say, okay, in addition to the general revenue that I'm giving you to draw down the federal dollars,
Right.
here's some more general revenue. That's just I'm not trying to be flippant, but that's a
No, no,
legislative
I-
decision.
No, that's fair. That's my point, right?
Yes, sir.
We would have to authorize you, give you the resources to be able to, draw down that, or at least minimize the wait list.
Yes, sir.
Whatever those dollars are. And I know it's a large amount,
Yes, sir.
based on the numbers you just provided per family. or-
And it would be great to have the wait list drawn down to zero, but I can almost guarantee that the minute it's zero, it would start filling again.
Well, let alone that, I don't know, I guess, back to the capacity, I'm not sure, we'd have to, this theoretically, right?
Yes, sir.
If you drew down the wait list to zero, would there be capacity in the child care centers themselves to be able to absorb those children? I mean, that's another
Right.
question.
That's a
as
very
well.
important question, yes, sir, that we'd have to work with the providers to determine how much we could without taxing what they can do.
Okay. I'm also interested in your apprenticeship programs, because I know a lot of these apprenticeship programs are extremely important to our high schools to get some of these kids in the trades or whatever, it's welding or electrical work, plumbing. There's a highly skilled jobs that they do provide. I mean, particularly for plumbers and electricians,
Yes, sir.
you do get a state license. Most of those go through some type of learn while you earn
Mhm.
apprenticeship program, and I think we need to increase those to provide folks not a handout but a hand up,
Yes, sir.
so that they can provide for their families in that program. So I'm interested in that. Members, any other questions for this panel before we go to public testimony? Oh, Representative Garcia Hernandez.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just had one follow-up question, following up after some of the questions that Chairman had regarding and you may have already actually said this whenever he was asking questions about it, but are there any level of what we have not drawn down in federal monies in any of the programs that we have instituted for TWC? Like, is there still, some that we would be able to draw down additional federal funds?
I would say,
The vocational rehab
Yeah.
program is the last program that I would say we have not fully matched. And that program came to TWC in 2017. We had not fully matched the federal program, the federal dollars available, because you get 2 years to spend the federal funds, 1 year to spend the match. We had sufficient federal funds to continue the program into that next year. As we've ramped up services and the number of people we're serving now, we've exceeded that capacity, which is why we have the exceptional item request. But that is the last federal program, I would say, that we haven't fully matched, is the vocational rehab program.
How much more is needed in order to match that?
So what
The
we have
exceptional item.
requested is, in our exceptional item, is we have a supplemental request in 2025 of $30.8 million, which would bring in $113 million in federal funds. And then we have $70.4 million for the biennium of 26-27 in general revenue that would bring in $260 million in federal funds.
Wonderful, thank you.
thank you, ma'am.
And Chair, just to
Thank you,
correct the
Chairman.
record, I had mentioned being below the floor, I think I may say 160 million. My latest forecast is actually 140 million, but
Okay.
I'm working on the next update right now, so. But
Fair enough.
just to correct the record.
Great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all very much, I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're not done yet, though.